love your podcast.
Thank you.
What made you decide to do that with Jimmy?
You know, Jimmy and I met about 10 years ago at one of the medical conferences, and he was sitting behind me, and we back when Twitter was really the live stream feed that came out. You know, I would watch his stuff, and I started twittering out some of the stuff that I was hearing in the conference, and realized there's this guy living low carb band that's hitting the same stuff, and turned around, he's right behind me, so we kind of hit it off.
Yeah.
I've been watching his stuff for years, and kind of used him as an initial a springboard for. As I got into the obesity field, he was already in that field looking at a lot of stuff as well. And so we became friends, and over the last few years, just chatting back and forth. And one day he was out doing a book tour in Arizona, and we started just shooting the breeze and said, hey, we got to do a podcast. He goes, you want to?
Yeah.
So I said, oh, well, yeah, let's. So we talked about
like
the format.
He's got like 70 of them.
He's got a bunch of them.
Books, he's got podcasts.
Oh, yeah, he's got a whole slew of them.
What's your interest in low carb eating and ketogenic dieting? Where did you get that interest?
You know, my father weighed about 400 pounds when he died at 58. He was diabetic. He had a quintuple bypass, had 5 vessels bypassed, and then a few years later had 3 of those stented. Went into renal failure. He was on 150 units of insulin and 32 pills a day. Died at 58. All the complications of diabetes, and his labs and my labs looked identical at age 32. So the challenge is.
Overweight too?
Oh yeah. So I came out of medical school in residency 65 pounds heavier than I am today. And I was in the military. I was running, doing triathlons, eating 1,200 calories a day, and couldn't get the weight to come off. And my patients were having the same problem. So what spurred me to go back was looking for an answer for obesity, because I couldn't do it. I was what I was telling my patients to do, and what I was doing, and what the medical establishment said to do was absolutely failing. And was given a patient. My average patient got a new pill every year, which is bothering me. So in doing an obesity medicine training, we actually went back and looked at the science from the early 1800s and read all of the obesity studies all the way up through today, and realized that in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, we had the answers to obesity. We just ignored them in the 70s. And so I went back to looking at, well, if we do low carb, the data shows that weight comes off. So I dropped what I was doing. I actually stopped exercising and started eating a pound of sausage and 3 eggs cooked in butter every morning, and lost 65 pounds. And went, holy crap, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So,
and also, like, I always try to tell people too, because people want to argue all the time, like, well, carbs aren't inherently bad.
No.
We just consume too much of them as Americans, or people in general. We consume so much of them. So I kind of grew up in a family that had a lot of weight issues, right? So you grow up overweight. It's like you're just used to being fat, doing things that are like extra fat, like putting extra butter on things. But now we find we can do that. On a ketogenic diet. We just have to cut out the sugars and the grains and all that kind of stuff.
What I found in the trends as I was looking at the first 5 or 6 years of my practice was that all of those people who were obese had notably higher levels of insulin, and it varied. It was genetic. It was different. Like, my wife would produce twice the insulin I do, or the normal person would in response to a piece of bread. I produce 10 times the insulin in response to that bread. So if I walk by a bakery, I gain weight. That's the problem.
And Jimmy has that issue.
Jimmy has the same issue as well. So I found this gradation of insulin levels that was being produced genetically in response to those starches. So some people can eat the starch and have no problem whatsoever, and others like me and Jimmy just gain a ton of weight. I can test for that. So that's what I do. So I've actually realized
I'm coming to see you then.
There you go. Yeah, you
see
how that works. So I test the insulin loads. I look at the cholesterol profiles, and that really gives me a kind of a peek into the genetic pattern of, okay, how much carb do we have to restrict with this person? And so for a large percentage of my practice, we're doing ketogenic diets, and for a smaller portion it's low carb, and for a few it's paleo, and it works. And so based on that gradation, we're able to identify, okay, this is what happens. And then what I was shocked to see was not only were they losing weight, but all of a sudden all these diseases like hypertension and cholesterol and gout and autoimmune issues started disappearing. And I went, whoa, and so as you chase that down science-wise, and you realize that insulin is essentially the master hormone driving these processes, and there's about 27 other hormones in the body that are influenced by that insulin. When you simply change your diet and you reset the system, then you can fine-tune where the other stuff's at, and makes practicing medicine fun again.
Somebody asked me this question, and it kind of stumped me, but I know it won't stump you, right? So they asked me, okay, if you're on a low-carb diet because you don't want to have an insulin response, when you eat things, and diabetics often struggle with their weight, but then they take insulin. He's like, why would they want their insulin higher? Like, if they're not making any insulin, wouldn't it be good to have no insulin? But that's
exactly the question I asked in medical school, because that was my father's issue. So you have to understand there's two different forms of diabetes. There's type 1, which actually makes no insulin whatsoever, and you have to have some insulin to stay alive. So there's a small level of basal insulin is essential. You got to have it. Type 2 diabetes is an overproduction of insulin. They produce too much. What we didn't realize, and what we're starting to find out now, is that type 2 diabetes is really the fourth stage of that insulin resistance. And insulin resistance started 25 years before you ever got there.
Wow.
So you're slowly getting more and more insulin as you get to that stage. And then when you hit diabetes, we treat it with medicine, type 2 diabetes, I should say. We treat it with medicines, but there comes a point when that pancreas just pitters out and stops producing enough insulin. Then we have to start giving you more insulin on top of that. And that's where a lot of people in the world are today, is the oral meds failed because we're being told to eat 50 grams of carbs with every meal.
Yeah.
And one guy told me today, he said, yeah, I was eating 800 grams of carbs a day. And I went, holy cow, just huge amounts of starch. That's probably what I was eating.
Yeah.
But as you go down that road, you produce more and more insulin, and then it comes out where the pancreas fails, you got to add insulin on. Now, some of the pharmaceutical approaches are start with insulin early, which actually makes the whole process worse. And so what I found is that I identify, are you producing insulin? Are you not? If you are, how resistant are you? What can we do to modify your body's own response to what it's doing through food? And then we add medicines on top of that if we have to. And that approach has been really successful the last 10 years.
Are there tips and tricks? My audience really is in that world of bodybuilding, powerlifting, and fitness. Are there things that we can do or supplement with to better help us stay in ketosis or get closer to it?
So the cool thing about the bodybuilding world is that bodybuilding, the weightlifting, the resistance training actually improves the insulin resistance. So the bodybuilders in my practice can actually fudge a little further. They can get away with a little more protein, they can get away with a little more carb because of what they do. But I have a lot of bodybuilders that come into me, and as we fine-tune their insulin loads, where their buddies are pounding 50 grams of protein at a meal, they back that down to maybe 35 or 40, and a little less insulin response allows them to tone up better but keep the muscle preservation there, and they do fantastic. So yeah, there are some things you can do when you start to identify the individuality of your body's genetics and how your body will respond to those hormones. So it's really kind of cool. And that's a field we're learning a lot about still.
Sure. And so what do you recommend when people first start out? There's always a lot of issues about, first of all, people quit.
Yeah.
Because they get disappointed. But I'm still waiting. So I'm a newbie to true keto. I told Jimmy I did keto several times before, but I never did it right. And I bought his book about a year ago. I did it right, sort of right, but I still thought was right. And then after taking a year to eat whatever I wanted to and feeling really shitty and sick all the time, I decided to do it again. But when I went back, I started testing my blood, and doing all these other things and realizing the benefits. Now what Jimmy promises, and all you guys say wait 3 months. Even Dominic D'Agostino, wait 3 months and you'll see. So I'm kind of waiting to get to that point. What are the things that you can expect, and why are some of the reasons people quit?
So I call it principle-based ketogenic dieting, and I actually wrote a blog post on it on my blog, and you can find these on there. But the first step is get your carbs down low enough to really reset the system, and that's less than 20 grams a day. Second is calculate out your protein needs that you need based on your height, and then we can modify the protein based on your activity level thereafter. Next is add the fat in and push that fat. Now, most people who've never used high fat, especially if you come from a bodybuilding world where you're being told the opposite, or an athletic world where you're being told the opposite, there's a significant fat adaptation phase. And for some people, it's 4 weeks. For me, it was almost 12. And so it takes almost 3 months for your gut to get used to this high amount of fat, and for you to upregulate the receptors. You're going to find that you're going to be fatigued during that period of time. You're going to get dehydrated, so putting salt and water back in your system in a way that you never did before is different. Not just sodium, but potassium, magnesium, and zinc. All those are big key elements. Realizing that your overall your need to lift and your energy levels will drop, and so a lot of people go, Doc, I can't even lift half what I was lifting before. What's the deal? I said, your fuel source has changed. I've taken you off unleaded and I'm putting you on diesel, and you got to learn to use the diesel. And that's essentially what's happening. Sure. Once those mitochondria ramp up and you've got those receptors that can absorb that fat, all of a sudden one day the switch turns and you go, holy crap, I feel great. And so that's what happening. So be patient with it.
Yeah.
If you're not seeing it, then
I do feel great.
Yeah.
I can tell the difference just getting off the sugar.
Yeah, it does.
In general. But I know that you guys say that a lot of great things happen when you're on ketones after.
After about 3 months, you really start to feel the effect. The amazing thing that I see is a lot of guys tell me, Doc, You know, I used to have to work out 6 days a week to maintain my muscle mass, and now it's just like 2 or 3 days a week, and I maintain that mass, and I feel
That's
great.
what I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around. It's like training less. You don't, like, I haven't done, so I weighed, when I started this a month ago, actually I contacted Jimmy, said, hey, I didn't even start keto yet when I contacted him. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to start keto again. I'm going to be at this conference. I'd love to meet you, whatever.
Yeah.
And of course, he was like, hey, cool.
Probably, yeah.
You know, but even from then to now, I lost like 25 pounds. Like, it comes off me quick in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then it slows down.
Your body wants to, two things are happening. Number one, your body says, I got too much storage, I want to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So it'll dump it. But in the process, the amazing thing is that when you shift into, even part of the day when you shift into ketosis, the ketone actually does two amazing things. It preserves access to testosterone, where people like me who produce high levels of insulin suck that testosterone away in the fat cell and you can't access it. So the testosterone helps muscle stability. And then the second thing is that the way the ketone works, it preserves leucine, which is key for muscle growth. So you're going to be putting on muscle while you're losing fat. And people are going, I'm not doing anything more than I was already doing, but yet and so what freaks a lot of people is out, scale weight doesn't change. They're going, this diet doesn't work. Well, if we measure their waist, they're shrinking, they're gaining muscle and losing fat at the same time. And then as you begin to add in an exercise regimen, you start to see the effects there. And so it's just a matter of converting the system over, if that answers your question.
Yeah. I feel really strong actually when I eat whole eggs and red meat.
Yep.
And I know that hormones, like testosterone and stuff like that, they are made from cholesterol.
They come from cholesterol.
Is there a correlation there?
Absolutely.
To strength and our cholesterol levels and stuff like that?
Well, remember that 80% of your brain is made from fat, and cholesterol is a key component of that. And all of our vitamins and nutrients that we do all this green juicing for, it's actually found in the animal fat. The animal eats the vegetables, puts those nutrients, those fat soluble vitamins into those nutrients, and you end up getting them when you eat the fat. So that's the cool thing that happens.
Fat soluble vitamins are the ones.
So anything that sounds like a letter of the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, those are all fat soluble vitamins.
And then vitamin F is fat.
It's fat. Yep, vitamin F is fat.
I remember you guys went through like one of the podcasts we went to the alpha.
Vitamin F is fat. Yep.
Well, I know you have to run. Thank you so much for.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk to you in the movie for sure. I want to come out.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, come out.
Get tested and do.
Oh yeah, get tested. Let's go through that.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right, take good care.